Okay, right, for this part then we're going to look at mitosis and meiosis and the differences between the two. So, first of all, mitosis is just all about your cells being able to divide. So why do they need to divide? You need to replace worn out cells, you need to repair damaged tissue, and you need to grow by producing new cells. And that's why we carry out this process of mitosis. Each cell produces two genetically identical daughter cells. And if you're asked for a definition of mitosis, that is what you would say. It's the production of two genetically identical daughter cells. This increases the total number of cells in a multicellular organism. So where you started off right at the beginning as one sperm and one egg that came together to make one cell, that then had to make a copy of itself and split into two, copy of itself split into two. And that's what mitosis basically is all about. It's about making a copy and splitting into two, and then it growing bigger, and then making a copy, splitting into two and growing bigger. In the nucleus of most of your body cells, you have two sets of chromosomes arranged as 23 matching pairs of chromosomes. These cells are described as diploid. Okay, just think of di means two, diploid, and are common to all mammals. Before a cell divides, its genetic material has to be copied so that each cell has a complete set of genetic material because it has to be an identical copy. Each chromosome made of one molecule of DNA is copied. So before a cell divides, each molecule of DNA copies itself, and this is called DNA replication. If you just look on the next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about here. So if you look at this then, this DNA is basically splitting into two and then making a copy of itself on the other side, and that's what's happening with DNA replication. So if we just go back to mitosis then, so how does DNA replicate? So the DNA is a double-stranded molecule. The molecule unzips, forming two new strands. I'm just going to put that with a diagram back on, it might help. This exposes the DNA bases on each strand. Spare DNA bases in the nucleus line up against each separated strand of DNA. They only align next to their complementary DNA base, forming base pairs. And if you remember, C always goes with G, A always goes with T. So if you look down like the right hand side, for instance, you've got G, T, G, A, T. Well, that means you've got to have C, A, C, T, A, and so on. And you can see that's the way this works. It's a very clever little system. Okay, so if we just go back to the process of mitosis then, when each chromosome has made a copy of itself, these duplicated chromosomes line up across the centre of the cell. Then each double chromosome splits into its two identical copies. Each copy moves to opposite ends of the cell. Two new nuclei form, each with a full set of chromosomes. The cell divides into two genetically identical cells. And if you look at the diagram, you'll see that's exactly what's happened. Okay, so the cell's resting at the beginning, then each chromosome is copied, the single strand forms double-stranded X shape, the spindle forms, the chromosomes are arranged along the equator, along the middle. The chromosome single strands move to the poles of the cell because the spindles pull them, and then two genetically identical cells are produced. Now, some organisms can reproduce asexually. This type of reproduction uses mitosis just exactly the same way. So if you think about some plants, for instance, they usually reproduce, not always, because some of them produce seeds, but some of them just produce cuttings or baby plants like the spider plant. That's asexual reproduction because it's just an exact genetic copy of the mother. They have the same alleles, that's another key word, alleles, and an allele is just a version of a gene. Okay, so that's mitosis, making an exact genetic copy. So if we look at meiosis, now this is slightly different, okay, because this only involves the egg cells and the sperm cells, okay. With mitosis, that's all the cells in your body, they all carry out that, but meiosis in particular is just the egg and the sperm cells, and they're called the gametes, because gametes are sex cells, and they're involved in sexual reproduction. So egg cells are made in the ovaries and sperm cells are made in the testes. Gametes are made by a special kind of cell division called meiosis. So how does meiosis happen? Just before the cell divides by meiosis, copies of the genetic information are made just as they are before mitosis. So each chromosome has an exact copy of itself. However, in meiosis the cell divides twice, forming 4 gametes. Okay, now that's one of the important differences between mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis produces 2 daughter cells, meiosis produces 4 gametes. In the first division, the chromosomes pair up in their matched pairs. They line up along the centre of the cell. The members of each pair split up and go to opposite poles or ends of the cell. Now these 2 new cells each divide again, and this time the double chromosome splits and goes to opposite poles. 4 cells, each genetically different from each other and from the parent, and more importantly with only half the number of chromosomes of the parent cell. Because what you've got to remember is, if you had an egg cell and a sperm cell with 46 chromosomes in each, when they join together that means you'd have 92. Well, that's no good, because that's not what a human is. Meiosis introduces genetic variation, which is why you'll find brothers and sisters don't look exactly the same, because it's a different gene has been passed down. The cells made by meiosis are haploid gametes. If you remember, we talked about diploid earlier. Now haploid contains half the diploid number of chromosomes. So where we say haploid was the 46, haploid is the 23, diploid is the 46, because di is 2, hap is 1. In humans, gametes have 23 chromosomes and are genetically different from the parent cell. So when the egg and the sperm come together, they produce a diploid cell called a zygote. So you've got 2 haploid gametes, because they've got half a set each. They come together to form a diploid zygote. The zygote will divide by mitosis into many cells and grow into a new individual. Okay, so the real differences then between mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis produces genetically identical cells, whereas meiosis is only used with the gametes, and it produces 4 gametes which are not genetically identical, and they are haploid cells because they have half a set of the genetic information.